Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am so glad that you are here. Welcome to today's presentation, Establishing a Foundation of Safety and Support through SEL, hosted by us, Committee for Children, and our special guest from Round Rock Independent School District in Austin, Texas. All right, well, I'd love to say hello. My name is Jennifer Sanderlin. I'm Senior Education Partnerships Manager with Committee for Children. That means I get to work with schools and districts and nonprofit organizations, charter organizations to support social emotional learning, bullying prevention, and child abuse prevention in their school systems. It's really important work, and it's really gratifying work to me. I was formerly a teacher, a early learning teacher, nonprofit organization director, and have been in schools for 25 years or so. So this is really great work, and I feel very fortunate to do it. I also feel very fortunate to be here with my good friend and colleague, Rochelle, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Rochelle Fink. I am proud to serve Round Rock ISD, a northern suburb of Austin, Texas, as the coordinator of social emotional learning. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my district later, but I think the biggest thing is that I've been fortunate to serve this district for the last 4 years, really looking at a proactive way for us to approach 55 campuses and very different needs and very different capacities, but to really kind of look at school a little bit differently for some of our kiddos. Before I stepped into this role, I was a teacher and a counselor, and I'm a certified licensed professional counselor as well. And so this is my 13th year in education, and I'm just thankful every day that I get to do this work all the time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Rochelle. We actually are together. We are not normally. I'm based in Seattle, and Rochelle is in Austin, Texas, but we happen to be at a conference together in Chicago, so we are sitting in the same room, which is very nice. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's just jump in. I know an hour is a lot to give us today, so I want to make sure I make it worth your while and to give you lots of good information to take back with you or follow up with when time comes. So our presentation today are just some introductions. I'm going to just give you a little bit more information about Committee for Children, and Rochelle will tell you a little bit more about her district. And I'm going to actually highlight the research foundations around school safety, the things that connect to social emotional learning and school safety, since that's our topic today. And then Rochelle, as she mentioned, is going to talk about her district, the insights and the resources that they're using, some of the things that has worked well for them. It's been a journey, as it always is when you're doing any kind of initiative. So, and social emotional learning and all those related topics with it is no exception. So we'll get to that, and then of course we'll answer your questions at the end. Do feel free though, if you want to put questions in the chat box, you are welcome to. We just sometimes can't answer while we're talking, so we'll do our best to answer those questions during the time when you ask them, but we'll save them for the end as well. All right, so just a little bit about Committee for Children. We've been around since 1979. This is our 40th anniversary. It's very exciting for us to celebrate 40 years. A lot of nonprofits never even make it that far. So we are very grateful and excited that we are 40 years old and we're not stopping for anything. So you know us by our work, most likely, with the Second Step program and our mindfulness program, Mind Yeti. Our mission, though, is to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional learning and development. That's really all that we do. We're not a publisher of other curricula. We aren't trying to tackle anything but our three main areas of social emotional learning, bullying prevention, and child protection. So we do a lot of advocacy as well, both at the state and the federal level, to change policies and laws to help support those efforts. And if you're interested in more about Committee for Children, I do really highly recommend that you take a look at our website. You can see it there, cfchildren.org. Tons of great resources, some really fun free resources that actually have just launched, so I'll talk a little bit more about at the end. So I hope you'll visit us and see what Committee for Children is all about. Few more facts, though, for you is that we serve about 15 million children and in 70 countries and in all 50 states. Okay, so I think I'd like to launch in to kind of set the stage a little bit. So many of you know that school safety conversations are really at the height of, well, I would say the height of the time I've been working in this field, which is about 7 years. I know that there were many years of safe and drug-free schools and some of the other initiatives over time. I know that part of a lot of what people are doing with their ESSA plans does also include school safety. So it's nothing new. It's just that I think we're seeing more about it and hopefully also more resources, like a webinar like this one, these two clips that I put on, just some of the safety conversations I'm seeing. The first one is a infographic that is from the National Institute of Justice, a little bit about the numbers of school safety, so kind of give people a picture based in facts. Headlines can be, tricky. They can definitely be misleading and can cause some panic even sometimes. This one also from the NEA is a blog post on preventing school violence, some resources, reports, and information that you can find for educators, for families, and for communities about school safety and preventing violence. So these were just two that I grabbed really easily from reputable sources in my mind. So I encourage you to look at those, kind of see what you can see that's most relevant to where you are, your location. Today, we're going to be talking kind of in general, but also in specific. Since we have Rochelle here, she'll be talking about Austin and the climate that's in Texas. Hopefully, it kind of help you get a bigger picture. One thing, though, that we do know, we see, is that there is a school hardening going on, and it is one response that is as a reaction and hopefully prevention going forward in some of the gun violence issues that we've seen. In this particular graphic, you see the incidence based by year. You can see that in 2018, it was very, very high. So this is, I think, when people started to take notice and started to put in some of those measures like clear backpacks and alarms and metal detectors and more resource officers and lots of those physical barriers, alarms, and things like that, which are all also very useful. So I'm not going to talk about those things because that's not our specialty, but I do want to mention that the hardening is real. You all know that more than I do. And what we want to do is sort of look at how can we soften that hardening? How can we balance that so that it isn't just about the physical aspects of safety? So I'm going to segue into how can we soften the hardening? How do we interconnect our efforts to create safer schools? All right, so I'm going to start with this question and really kind of look at really kind of ground this whole presentation today in the idea of a positive and safe school climate. So I wanted to give you the definitions that you see here from the National School Climate Center. You can see there's the source at the bottom if you're interested in learning more. School climate is the norms, the values, and the expectations that support people feeling socially, emotionally, and physically safe. So when you look at that, it's kind of the big picture framework. We want people to be engaged and respected, that students, families, and educators are working together to develop and to contribute to that shared school vision, that everyone agrees that we want a safe and positive school climate, that educators are going to be modeling and nurturing those attitudes that emphasize those benefits, and that they get satisfaction gained from learning. Lastly, each person contributes to the operations of the school and the care of the physical environment. So it's really a team effort. These are the things that all fold into what a positive school climate is. Also from the National School Climate Center, the things they call out as benefits of a positive school climate kind of fall into 4 different categories: safety, teaching and learning, institutional environment, and interpersonal relationships. So for today, we're focused on safety. So I pulled out the bullet points from the safety part of those 4 categories from the National School Climate Center. Safety, under that you can see a dramatic decrease in risky behaviors. You can see lower rates of student suspensions and discipline issues in general. And I'll say from personal experience, a positive school climate can also change what those discipline issues are, that the types of incidents are changing to be less violent is what I'm noticing just anecdotally in my work. And that there are, of course, physical, social, and emotional benefits from feeling safe. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the big picture of school climate. So what we're going to do is sort of what we decided, Rochelle and I, as we work together on these 5 buckets of what kind of is really contributing to a safer school through school climate. So I'm going to unpack each of these a little bit so that you understand kind of where we're coming from. And that way everybody's on the same page too, so that we understand, what do we mean by social emotional learning? What do we mean by trauma-informed care? We also put in bullying prevention, restorative practices, and mental health supports, which we really feel all of those things fit together really nicely to help create that positive school and safe school climate. So I'm going to start with social emotional learning. Looking at Tier 1 social emotional learning in particular, really trying to have that as a foundation that all students, not just those who would be, creating incidents, those that are, victims, or those that do bullying behavior, not just the kids that are causing disruptions or having trouble, but all kids can benefit from having the skills, being able to relate to one another and solve problems, the things that can really help benefit them in school, but also in life. And having that as a foundation can really help students, gain those stronger social emotional skills. Also, at the same time, adults who are going to model those positive social emotional skills, those two things together then help with improved relationships, which then helps with an increased sense of safety and support, and ultimately that more positive school climate where people feel safe, they feel welcome. When you have a strong sense of supportive relationships within the school community, all the stakeholders have that increased sense of safety and support, which ultimately really does lead to that more positive school climate. I've seen it happen myself, so I know that it works. It's definitely an undertaking if you're not currently doing anything like a Tier 1 social emotional learning program school-wide, but it definitely pays off. So just to make sure that you understand what social emotional learning, or SEL, is, it's having the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage your emotions, to establish and maintain positive relationships that we just mentioned, to make responsible decisions, to set and achieve positive goals, and to be able to feel and show empathy for others. Sometimes we see other terms for SEL. We'll see things like life skills, soft skills, character education sometimes falls in there, 21st century skills. You've seen probably 10 more things that I'm not thinking of today, that what sometimes gets a little bit mixed up of what is SEL. So there's lots of good places you can find out more information about what is SEL, not just in terms of education with children, but for adults and for coworkers and workplaces. We actually just revamped our What is SEL pages on cfchildren.org, so I'd love for you to go there. But also CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. They are really a treasure trove of research and tools and resources. So that's where the source on this page comes from as well. So hopefully you'll check that out if you're someone who likes to dig into research especially. So some of the keys I just want to mention about SEL programming that make it really successful and useful in looking at school climate and school safety is that students are individually able to build up their self-regulation and social emotional skills. Self-regulation is just a huge part of building those social emotional skills. It's being able to monitor and manage your thoughts and your emotions and your actions is pretty important for keeping any environment safe. We also see that peers who are learning and using these skills can model those for everyone, for those that might be struggling, for those that might need a little more support. They could be getting that support through the professional educators in the building, but they can also get that through their peers, through peers that have learned those skills and are using them, and you're practicing them in a context, in a time when these skills are needed. When you're actually in a social context, that's when you have to manage and make those decisions and build up those relationships. And so having peers that have those skills are going to help make that process easier for someone who might struggle. And then lastly, it helps to also build an environment that has strong pro-social norms, that it's not cool to be mean, that kindness is good, that being understanding and having empathy is a part of who we are as a community. Things like that can really make a difference in how that school feels, that kids are going to protect each other and they're going to be a part of creating a safe environment together through having those really positive pro-social norms. Okay, so I'm going to shift now to the next bucket, which is the trauma-informed practices. You all, I'm sure, have a lot more experience, again, with kids coming in with a lot of different experiences, and trauma may be one of them. So since this is really the foundation of what many of the policies in different states are also focusing on, we wanted to make sure we included trauma-informed care and how trauma it impacts students. So since we also know that 2/3 of U.S. children have been exposed to some kind of trauma by age 16, and that comes from, I don't know if you're familiar, the Adverse Childhood Experiences from ACEs, that these can be things like violence in the home, it could be the school or community, a death or a serious illness of a family member, even things like divorce, obviously abuse in the home or violence are included with other factors like poverty or racism. Students are definitely holding a lot more on their shoulders than their school backpacks. And ways that it can impact them is through achievement. Obviously, it can very much impact students' ability to learn new information, to bring it into the brain, to synthesize that, and to be able to use it. When you're having an emotional experience, I know this for myself, that you can't really take in new information and then remember it and use it later. Your brain can only do so many things at once, and an emotional response is definitely going to override a logical thinking response. Trauma affects the brain in many other ways, and I can't get into too much detail in this webinar, but it does also affect your ability to focus attention, and also in making decisions about behavior and how you behave. Being able to control your body and your thoughts and emotions and your actions is exponentially harder when you're dealing with a major trauma or even a small trauma that feels major to that child. So when you look at how can we change that, we know these kids are coming. We can't do a lot to change that, at least from where we sit necessarily, at least in the short term. So when those kids arrive, when they get to the school, it's a new school year, and some of you are probably still getting to know your students, and every year kind of offers a new opportunity to think about how are we going to welcome these kids in? How are we going to make sure we're treating all of them with the care and concern that they need so that then they can learn? So a trauma-sensitive school will realize, recognize, respond, and resist. So realizing that the prevalence of trauma in students' lives is there, that knowing it's there and that they're coming in and you may or may not know who is impacted by trauma. It's also being able to recognize the impact of trauma on academic and behavioral functioning, knowing that students that are in that situation, they're not trying to be a quote-unquote bad student. They're not trying to have bad behavior necessarily. They're acting based on where they're at emotionally and how they feel. So being able to then know how to respond is also really important to provide universal and multi-tiered support. So both, making sure you're covering that tier 1, like I was mentioning, but also to have that multi-tiered support that's sensitive to each student's unique needs. And that's hard to do. I know that is not that's much, much easier said than done. So I understand that. But being mindful of creating your policies, procedures, and your practices that can avoid re-traumatization, that making sure that we are not making it worse. I think that's pretty important to think about as well. All right, so these 4 R's can help to kind of serve as that guideline for creating a safe environment which our students can learn. A trauma-sensitive school not only keeps students physically safe, but it also addresses their emotional well-being, social needs, and academic safety. And I think Rochelle will do a really great job of giving us some examples of the things that they're doing that would help these students that are in this situation. And trauma, it can come and go a little bit too. I think for some of these children, things may have happened to them before they got to you. They might be happening now, and they might happen in the future, and they might be afraid of it happening in the future. So just having that trauma-sensitive practice can help be a safety net to make that a safer environment for that child. All right, so next... I'll just finish this out with the trauma-informed practices to say that there's these 4 components of being safe and supportive, implementing an SEL program, prevent bullying, and train adults. So these are some of the things to consider. Obviously, you'd have to unpack all of those and create some consistency and find what's right for your school and your students or your district or your community too, because communities can also be trauma-informed and communities can help to prevent re-traumatization as well. All right, so I just want to end with that in a trauma-sensitive school that students need to feel accepted and understood. They need to feel safe and supported. They need to help to learn those self-regulation and social emotional skills to avoid re-traumatization. All right, moving on now to effective bullying prevention. I'm not going to spend too much time on bullying prevention. I'm going to show you some resources at the end that we have launched that I think you're going to like and hopefully you'll use, that are some free resources. But really, when we look at bullying prevention, it ties in with so many of the other things that we're doing to build social emotional competence and to build a safer school environment, to build more positive relationships. But if you're looking at how do we make sure we're covering our bases, look at the policies and procedures and your behavioral expectations. These are things like PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Support. A lot of different districts or schools have different names for the things that they're doing that all come down to making sure kids know what's expected of them, making sure that the staff know what they need to do if they encounter bullying, what the policy says, what the procedure says, even just as simple as the definition of knowing what is bullying and what is it not. Sometimes that's just as important, is what is it not can help alleviate some issues. Helping to make sure parents understand what the policies and the procedures and the behavior expectations are as well. Parents can be, families of course are extremely concerned for their children, and as they should be, for them to help them understand what it is that you're doing to prevent bullying and address bullying. Helping them be a collaborator in the process can really alleviate some of the strain on the administrative staff, school counselor, and others that often deal with bullying. So, of course, building social emotional competencies, that is one of the best ways to prevent bullying from a foundational aspect. And then, of course, teaching some actual bullying prevention lessons is also helpful. And also, just as equally helpful and important is having all staff be trained, and that it's ongoing, that it's not just, a half-day seminar sometime at the end of the school year, and then you forget what you learned by the time the new school year comes around. And that would be true too, as far as I'm concerned, that doing a bullying prevention assembly and sort of leaving it at that for the students probably isn't going to give you the impact you're looking for either. So just being mindful, a lot of schools and districts create task force or committees where they involve families and even students to help them to map out what it is they're going to be doing. And obviously a lot of larger districts have very, very well thought out policies and procedures that schools then need to adapt to and be familiar with and understand. So almost the last thing of our 5 buckets that we were looking at was school safety and social emotional learning and how to build a positive school climate is restorative problem solving, restorative practices that comes from the restorative justice framework, really to stimulate a non-confrontational dialogue among the students involved in a conflict. It is more than just the sort of problem solving I think that I learned maybe when I was a child, but having this framework and being able to give this opportunity with some structure can help students and staff to be much more effective in solving those problems and creating a true connection among students versus, a problem happens, to tell the child, say you're sorry, they say they're sorry, the other child doesn't believe it, and nobody learns, right? That's from way, way, way back. That's how we used to handle things, and that's not really enough. So in restorative problem solving, offended students have that opportunity to engage in a constructive dialogue in a safe space where they can be heard and understood. These group interactions often lead to a process of rebuilding of crucial social and emotional connections. Because truly, and I think Rochelle would agree with me, is that you can't restore something, you can't restore a relationship if there wasn't a relationship to begin with.
Yes.
So we need to work on making sure they do have those positive relationships, and then we have a way to restore, a way to come back. So being able to acknowledge accountability, to use creative problem solving. I noticed in just my work with young kids, they often get very tunnel vision on there's only one way to solve this problem, and they're not going to back off with that. So we have to teach them that you can be creative. To reach that mutual understanding of their conflict, to understand what it is. What are we actually arguing about? What the problem is can solve a lot of the problem too, especially if you're looking at it without blame. That's one of the things we teach in our program in Second Step, is that we say the problem without blame. And then you just get to the problem and you can solve it like a puzzle. And if I have 2 seconds to be up on my pedestal, or what is that called when you're on my soapbox, it's really just, if we did that as a society, if we could just say the problem without the blame, then we can just get to the problem and fix it. So much better. It takes the tension out of it. So, and then lastly, just to nurture that environment of respect, having a system and a framework like restorative problem solving, restorative practices can sort of help have a system that people cling to, that they know works, that we can always lean on, that we're going to go back to whenever there's a problem. It also helps them to see the other side. And during that time, it can really advance those positive emotional values of resilience, of compassion, responsibility, and empathy. All right, and the very last thing we wanted to mention is administrator training. And I know Rochelle's going to talk about this as well, that it needs to be in those buckets, on the top level of concerns and things that we need to do to make sure that administrators know what social emotional learning is, that they're leading social emotional learning efforts at their school, that they've set it as a priority so that it allows the teachers and other educators to know this is okay for me to be doing. I have resources, I have support, so I'm going to work on this. And it's a part that's just as has the priority like any of the other subjects in content areas. Learning about trauma-informed care, what does that mean to have a trauma-sensitive school? What are the steps they could take to start making that happen? To have training in cultural competence, implicit bias, and intersectionality, to make sure they're very aware of their own biases and their own what opportunities they have to help their staff to build these skills and awareness, and then the problem solving, restorative practices and problem solving, as I just mentioned. So keeping in mind that administrators need this training too, that it hasn't been a part of necessarily their training to become an administrator, or I know it wasn't when I was in my teaching program a long, long time ago. Just making sure that the administrator gets what they need so they can lead the effort and be authentic about it and feel good about it, and having the support they need from the district as well. A lot of the safety programs and policies that we see right now rely on the student resource or SROs. school resource officers. I had a brain melt for a minute there on the school resource officers, but for them to be effective and comfortable in their roles, they need to be trained and they need to be supported by the administrator as well. They're a part of the picture, but they're not the only part of what safety means in a school. And I just encourage you, because some of the things I've seen that have been the most effective have been where people are getting support from community partnerships. So I've put a few ideas on here that you might look at later when we go back, because I'm seeing our time and I want to make sure I give Rochelle all the time she needs to tell you all about the work they're doing in Round Rock ISD.
Thanks, Jennifer. So, like I said earlier, we are a larger suburban district outside of Austin, Texas, just to the north, that covers about 55 campuses and about 110 square miles. So it's a really large space with very unique campuses. So within those 55 campuses, I can't say that there are two that are the same. And if you look at our demographics, that tends to be kind of the average, if you will. So that tends to be the middle. So for part of it, it is really looking at, we've got campuses that have much higher areas of need and campuses that look a little bit different, but very much all are addressing social emotional learning in very unique ways to fit the needs of their campuses and to fit the needs of their students. And I think that's been the critical role, is that we haven't created a cookie cutter approach that all 55 campuses look the same. It's very much a customized approach to look at what campuses specifically need and create a plan that addresses their needs as they need them. We have a strategic plan that I'll talk about here in a second that gives a framework. So they are all talking and speaking the same language, but the way that they're implementing it may look a little bit different. And just to give you an idea of some of the creativity that we're having within the district, we were just recently featured in an Austin News article about one of our teachers at Deer Park Middle School who has basically said, I am not going to eat lunch in the teacher's lounge or in my classroom by myself. I am going to spend that time getting to know my students. And so she has said, I'm going to spend 120 days getting to know all 120 of her students. And she has really found that just by even taking that 20 minutes to get to know kids and ask questions and get to know them on a one-on-one basis, it's completely transformed her classroom. So I'm going to give you a little bit to push the video and watch it, and I will see you back here in a couple seconds.
How would you get students to connect with you to feel welcome and understood?
For one Round Rock ISD teacher, the answer is as simple as lunch. KXAN education reporter Tom Miller introduces us to the teacher dining to go deeper.
A queen, a dictator, very good, even an oligarchy.
During her 6th grade World Cultures class, Deer Park Middle School teacher Elizabeth Rodriguez dives into the different forms of government. Come lunchtime, it's her students that she's digging into.
Do you get along with them? What do you like better, baseball or football? Does your mom make it in a round pie dish?
In an effort to deepen the relationship with her students, Rodriguez is vowing to have lunch with all 120 of them.
You like tater tots?
Yep, a lot.
This day, it was Isaiah Odom's turn.
Makes you feel like heard, like appreciated, like makes you feel like I'm worth something.
It's a feeling shared by most.
At first it was like, I don't know about this, but it was actually really fun.
Are there really healthy chips?
She's really fun. I wish I could have a lunch with her like 5 times.
However, it isn't just about having a good time.
And I've had students tell me things that, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I've had students cry.
Though painful in the moment, Rodriguez believes the conversations give students an outlet and ally.
What is unlimited government? And give us an example.
So when it's time to go back to her lessons,
These people that we've elected go to Washington.
The hope is that students will view Rodriguez as not just their teacher, but as a trusted adult who cares. In Round Rock, Tom Miller, KXAN News.
Great story. This is the first year Rodriguez is doing lunches with her students. She got the idea from a school-wide training focused on helping teachers better connect with their students. Online right now, see how other teachers and parents locally and across the nation are connecting with students. It's all part of.
All right, so Miss Rodriguez is just one example of ways that teachers are getting really creative to really get to know their students. So oftentimes when we think about school safety, we think about the hardening of the schools. We think about the safe and secure entries. We think about the single access front entries. And really now we're starting to look at school safety more as an opportunity to look at how do we soften and build connections between students and between teachers and students themselves and between teachers and parents as well. Because when everybody is connected, we know that there is a reduction in feelings of anxiety, of mental health concerns. But at the same time, when we're building stronger connections, it also gives me as the teacher or me as the building leader an opportunity to go, something's not right, and really take a proactive approach to everything that's happening. And kind of, if I'm creating a place where students feel safe in my classroom, both physically and emotionally, I have a better understanding of what's happening in the classroom. And I have a better understanding of what's happening with students that I can go, what's going on? How's it like? Talk to me about what you're feeling today, or I can refer them to a counselor if I need to. So in the spring of 2018, we completely redid our strategic plan. And our strategic plan before wasn't terrible, but if you look at our 6 goals that were created in that timeline, they are steeped in social emotional learning or mental health language, or that behavioral health language. But if you look specifically at goal 5, we will develop the whole child, cultivating the social and emotional skills needed to thrive in a diverse and ever-changing world. That is SEL through and through. That really sparked for a lot of our campuses the opportunity to think about school differently. I joined Round Rock ISD 4 years ago. I was the first person. My position was brand new at that time. And so I walked into a position where campuses were already doing this work. So when I will tell people that Round Rock ISD had a brand new position 4 years ago, it often will sound like this work just started 4 years ago, but our campuses were doing the work. But 4 years ago, we took a very intentional approach to what does that work look like on a grander scale? And what does that work look like in connecting the dots for campuses and providing more resources? And one of the ways that we did that was through creating a common language. We have, like I said, 55 very different campuses throughout a very large space, and we serve over 50,000 students. And so we have to be creative in what servicing those students looks like, because all of our students deserve our best and our brightest every single day. And so really being able to say, we are going to create space where every single student feels heard, valued, and understood, then we will be good. Like, we will have done and met goal 5. The thing that's also been really helpful in kind of moving some of this work forward is that campuses write campus improvement plans every single year, and they use these 6 goals to drive their campus improvement plans. So campuses are looking at goal 5 and saying, what am I doing on my campus to drive the work forward, to educate the whole child, to cultivate social emotional skills in the world that we live in? And that's where we've really seen some really fun things happening. At the same time, so the same year of 2017, 2018, we as a district launched our social emotional learning framework. As you can imagine, with 55 different campuses, we wanted to create a common language that allowed campuses to continue to be their autonomous self, but have consistent conversations, whether it's an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, one of our specialized campuses, and really even central office and our parenting populations, to what is strong quality social emotional wellness and competence for every single person look like. And so you will see our graphic that encompasses all 5 components. So our red circle with the heart is our climate and culture, and that's often, as Jen said, one of the most critical places that if that is not in a place that's thriving, the rest of them is going to kind of move at a much slower pace. The yellow light bulb that you see is explicit instruction, and we have made great gains in the last 4 years to the point where every single one of our pre-K classrooms, 30 of our 34 elementary schools, all of our middle schools, and 3 of our high schools engage in explicit instruction of social emotional learning skills through the second step curriculum every single day. And so I have worked with our campuses to create a scope and sequence for them, but they also have the ability to take that and tailor it to their needs. So if they see a need arise on their campus, they can take campus or resources that are available and adjust them to fit what they need them to do. Most of the campuses have told me that they keep the scope and sequence exactly the same because they like that it's kind of done for them and they don't have to think about it in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we really took and we're really intentional about where things are placed. So for example, October launches Bully Prevention Month. And so this next week in all elementary and middle school campuses, there will be a lesson specifically focused on what does a bullying situation look like? How do I report it on my campus? What does it mean for me to have someone tell me as a potential perpetrator, what does that look like? And so it's placed here because oftentimes this will kick off that campaign for campuses, but it's also at a time where you might have an increase in behaviors and it's kind of coming at a really critical time. That teal outline of a person that you see is all focused to staff social and emotional learning because we know that we have to focus on the big people in the building as much as we focus on the little people in the building. And I say that at both elementary, middle school, and high school campuses, and high school campuses laugh at me sometimes when I say that. But we have adults and we have students, and we need to address the adults as much as we address the students because oftentimes when we think about SEL, we think it's all for the kids. But if as an adult, I am not a regulated individual in my classroom, there is no way I can expect students to be regulated either. And then the purple notebook that you see is academic integration. And so we find very unique ways in our curriculum to take what we're teaching explicitly in that yellow bubble and combine it into curriculum itself. So you saw Ms. Rodriguez teaching world cultures, which is our 6th grade social studies curriculum. And there are places where she can very naturally talk about other cultures, or she can talk about what it means to engage in discourse and use the language from the second step curriculum from a lesson that they would have taught that week really intentionally. And that last kind of blue circle with the wheels is parents, families, and communities, because we know that they are the things that keep the wheels turning. When we are able to engage our parents and our community in really intentional ways, amazing things are happening. And this year, I'm super excited. I'll back up. Last year, we launched some parenting classes at the after school and at night to just engage in dialogue with parents, whether it was on study skills or one of the ones that a colleague of mine just did was on what does stress and anxiety look like in teens. And parents are thriving for this, like they're begging for this information. But what does it look like? And how do I get help for my kiddo? We did one on how do you talk to your kids so that they will talk to you? Oftentimes as a counselor, I would have a parent say, I ask them how their day was and I get fine. And I don't get much besides that. But there's really good tips that we can work with parents on that oftentimes, when I was a counselor, I had been trained in, but I forget that not everybody has been trained in that. So I personally have a 2-year-old, and I remind myself all the time that even though I'm trained in these skills, I don't always apply them even with my 2-year-old. So even if I don't have if I have these skills and I'm finding places where I'm needing some additional support, it's no wonder that our parents are asking. There's no user manual for being a parent. I wish there was sometimes, but there's not. But really coming together to say, we are a team and we are a community, and let's work together because together we are stronger. And so all 5 of these components together create well-rounded school climates and well-rounded schools that are really focused on how are we proactive at addressing student needs. And so we have engaged in over, I think last year we gave over 750 hours of professional development to campuses across our district and really working for Tier 1 fidelity in these practices. Now, it's not saying that every campus has to do the same thing, but in terms of looking at their campuses, they need to be hitting these 5 buckets with fidelity. And so we're really launching some tools this year that help campuses do that. And so with the help of our research and evaluation team, we have created kind of a reflection framework or a framework reflection tool that campuses can go into and look at what does high quality SEL implementation look like. And they're centered around both these 5 buckets, but also positive behavior supports. Are we explicitly teaching skills to students? Restorative practices. Are we building capacity in space where teachers are intentionally connecting with students so that they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening? Because when they have a better feeling for what's happening, they're better able to kind of pick up those hiccups, if you will, or that time where a student just feels off. And oftentimes it's not about the teacher themselves. It's about something that happened either earlier in the day or the day before that is now coming into play because the student feels safe. And in every professional development that we give, we are weaving in the opportunity, like the language of the impact of trauma in schools, because we know that it cannot be a conversation that just happens in isolation at one time, kind of like bullying. It can't be a one-time conversation. It really needs to be woven throughout everything that we do. And the other thing that's really helpful in a lot of this is it's really looking at our systems. So it's looking at a place where it's one thing for us to talk about valuing relationships and being really strong in valuing relationships when everything's going really great. But when something happens, or when discipline happens or behavior happens, how do we respond in a way that is relational? And how do we respond to a way that goes back to building relational capacity as opposed to just shaming students or making students feel like they're not being heard, valued, or understood? Because at the end of the day, if we can do those 3 things, if we can help students feel heard, valued, and understood, we have met their emotional goal in the educational setting. So we really take an integrated approach. I am incredibly lucky that while my title is Social Emotional Learning Coordinator, I am not the only person working this work. In fact, with the district of 55 campuses, I couldn't be the only person doing this work. So we have an amazing counseling services team, and our professional school counselors on all of our campuses are working incredibly hard to really meet students' needs in a proactive and responsive ways based on what students' needs. So they are in classrooms doing guidance lessons outside of the explicit instruction that they're receiving through Second Step. Campuses that are using Second Step have actually aligned their guidance lessons and Second Step together. So it doesn't feel like 2 very different things. It really feels like a continual conversation that just adds more to the meat of what's happening. And then another one of this year, we are actually launching for the first time 2 mental health centers. So we have partnered with a local mental health authority, Bluebonnet Trails, to bring mental health services to our campuses. And it's going to be groundbreaking for us in a lot of ways because we're bringing the community into the school to meet students' needs where they don't have to leave, they don't have to miss more school to go to a counseling session, or they don't have to miss more school to get the help that they need. It's really kind of breaking down barriers and opening doors for a lot of places. And so when we see an immediate need, that referral process doesn't take nearly as long because we have the resources. Now, we're only launching 2 this year, but it's our inaugural year. So we are collecting tons of data. We are looking at tons of resources and referrals, and we'll make an informed decision later whether or not to expand. But for right now, those 2 are going to be incredibly groundbreaking. Another one of my colleagues who I work very, very closely with is she has her doctorate in counseling as well. And she does a lot of work with our schools on suicide awareness, on SES. She's phenomenal and will often have conversations with me about like staff self-care and setting boundaries and just having really frank conversations. I jokingly tell her, like, she will have conversations with me that I know I should have with myself, but it just feels better coming from Amy. In a lot of ways, because she says things that I'm like, oh yeah, that would be amazing. She and I often will have this conversation that it's one thing for us to talk about physical health, right? So my daughter had, this time last year, was struggling with ear infections, she had tubes, and I think everybody in my office knew it, right? It was nothing for me to say, Addison has another ear infection. I'm not sure what's going on. But if that was a behavioral concern or a mental health concern, we immediately keep it inside and we don't talk about it. So if we can kind of change that conversation to a place where we can talk about what's happening and we can have really real conversations and talk about mental health as if it was a physical health concern, because it is, then we're looking at ways that we can really kind of close the circle and bring people together. And so through all of those different components, we're really working to do that. Within the last 2 years as a district, we have launched our equity task force, and they have done some amazing work this year just around the ways that racial and educational equity plays out in our district. The equity task force worked really closely with Dr. Terrence Green, who is an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin. Go Longhorns. And he provided a professional development to our administrators and our district leaders and a select group of teachers this summer to launch this school year and to really get our campuses thinking about what racial and educational equity looks like for our students and for our parents and for our educators in a lot of the same ways that we talked about social emotional learning, that it can't just be a Band-Aid. It can't just be one person putting, the analogy that he uses is sugar on a cake, right? So we can't just put sprinkles on a cake if we forgot the sugar. We have to completely rebake the cake. And so we have to completely rethink the way we are doing education. And in some cases, that looks like doing school differently. And that looks like engaging in restorative practices that feel a little funny sometimes, but that often create a bigger space for teachers and create a bigger space for students. Because we know that when students feel like they are not safe, if they're in a space where they are a marginalized individual and they don't feel safe, in the book Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, Dr. Zaretta Hammond talks about what's called the amygdala hijack. And so they don't feel safe because their cortisol levels are going through the roof, and they feel the exact same way as a student that has been through extreme physical trauma or extreme mental trauma. It is the exact same space, and we often forget that. And so really looking at how are we building this whole capacity to look at what is a safe and supportive learning environment look like for every single one of our students and every single one of our staff members and every single one of our parents. Because at the end of the day, school should be a place of safety and a place of security. And the honest truth is that for some of our students, it's very much not that. So we need to be very intentional about creating that. And then we also talked about examining campus systems for alignment. So we are working as a district this year as well to really look at our behavioral health systems and looking at our alignment between a proactive approach to behavior and explicitly teaching skills before they occur, but then also how do we respond in a relational way? And how do we respond when something happens? Lots of different things can play into that. But if we are looking at true alignment, if we say we value relationships and our gut reaction to a disciplinary approach is an exclusionary placement, those two practices are not in alignment. And so we really need to rethink those practices. It's going to be a year-long process. We have just started it in our district, but I think it's going to be one that we're going to see lots of really great value come out of. And I'm excited to be a part of that team as we move forward. I'm incredibly lucky that I get to work with a team of about 15 behavior interventionists. So they work directly on campus with students who have exhibited some kind of behavioral need, much like you would exhibit an academic need. Often they're one and the same. And so we're working together to expand their resources in creating a lot of these places as well. And then engaging with families as well. And I'm seeing a question. The book that I mentioned was Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Dr. Zaretta Hammond. But I want to leave you with a lot of the resources that we have used at the district level. Many of these are things that we have kind of talked about already, but we use Second Step. Like I said, we've launched and we've come a long way, probably within the last 3 of my 4 years in the district. But I don't think that steam is going to stop anytime soon. Many of our campuses use either Capturing Kids' Hearts or Teen Leadership from the Flippin' Group or the Leader in Me program on their campus for climate and culture. Our main go-to for restorative practices is the National Educators for Restorative Practices, and they actually have a ton of really great free resources on their website. So if you want to, you should go to nedrp.org, and I'll put it in the chat box here in a second. You can find tons of really great resources. They are really strong in proactive green resources for teachers, and so that's been really helpful. They put out like a circle question every day that you could ask. It's just one of many that you would ask. Courageous Conversations does a really great training called Beyond Diversity. We've provided that to a number of our campuses, or a number of our district and campus leaders for the last probably year and a half. And this year, our campus administrators have been charged that every single one of our administrators needs to go through that training. And it is a phenomenal resource. And they are able to kind of really start the conversation of what does racial and educational equity look like, and what does implicit bias look like in the classroom, and just in general, like what does culturally responsive teaching look like and implicit bias look like in everyday life and things that we wouldn't naturally think of. One of the places that really helped me in starting this journey in the last 4 years, coming into a district as a new person and with a new position, was the Castle resources. So that's why it's kind of all coming full circle that we're here at the Castle Conference. But
true.
They launched a district resource guide online in about the spring of 2015, maybe 2016. But in the last year and a half, they've launched their school resource implementation guide, and it is amazing the amount of resources that is in that resource itself. So if you're a campus leader and you're looking for what is my first step, they will give you, they often do it through some kind of self-assessment. So where is my biggest area of need, or where is my critical point that I can really start and go with? And so there's just really great resources in there. And so if you go to Castle, I'm sure even if you Googled Castle Schoolwide Implementation Guide, it would be the first thing that popped up. And those resources are free as well. So I think anytime we can get free resources, the better. And within their school resource guides, they have really great videos and just really quick training opportunities that if you wanted to push out to staff, you could. Again, all free as well. So that's a little bit about us as a district. At the very end, you will have my contact information. You are more than welcome to call me, email me, Twitter me, whatever you need to do if you've got questions, because this is just a very brief explanation of all the work that we're doing. But if there's anything you want more resources on, or you want a copy of anything, I am happy to facilitate that for you. So
that is very generous. I know that, Rochelle, that's really nice of you to do, and I hope that people will take you up on that offer. And I will leave our contact information at the end as well. I just wanted to end with a couple things for you, a reminder, I guess, to kind of pull it all together, that one of the things you can do, I guess, if you think about it in the big picture, it could be kind of daunting to, this is a lot of work, especially when you see this amazing work from Round Rock in a 25-minute segment. It sounds really easy and it's great. But one thing we can do is sort of keep our eye on the prize, so to speak, and to think about school as a sanctuary where all children can learn critical life skills and experience safety and support. I know for myself, when I was a child, I had a really unstable home in my elementary years, and school was my sanctuary. Reading, the school library, my teachers were all exactly who I relied on and learned from, and it was fantastic to have that. I feel very fortunate that my school was that way, even back then. So I think all of us can just try to move the needle at least a little bit in the things that we do ourselves to move the needle towards school as a sanctuary for students. And whatever bucket of things we talk about today, that's still going to be a step closer than it was before. And what I want to also do is invite you at the end here. I want to show you two resources. One is, of course, our Second Step program. We mentioned it a few different times here today. Our presentation wasn't really about that today, but you may have some questions or you would like to learn more. I hope you do. We have a series of webinars every month that you can tap into to learn more about the program that suits you. Our next one is tomorrow, the Foundation of Successful Learning, and that covers pre-K through 8th grade. So I hope you'll join us. That's at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can register in the same place where you registered for this one at secondstep.org/webinars. You can also find on-demand webinars there too, so if you've missed something or you want to see the recording, just definitely go there, and you can do that whenever it's convenient for you. For those of you that were asking, might have missed the beginning where I mentioned that we will send you a copy of this presentation, so you'll get that in your email as well. So if you wanted a PDF to share out, you can. And we'll send the recording as well, so you can share that. I hope that would be great. We would love for you to keep spreading the word for us. And the last thing I'd love for you to also spread the word, to check it out and spread the word, is we have just launched this week, in honor of Bullying Prevention Month, our new Captain Compassion campaign. It really is a way to introduce a bullying prevention superhero, Captain Compassion. She teaches parents, kids, her trusty sidekick, Kid Kinder, how to use their bystander power, how to help stop bullying. So this page lives on cfchildren.org, so not on secondstep.org, but on the Committee for Children page. And it provides great resources for teachers and families, activities for kids, including short videos, a cartoon activity that you could use year-round, but particularly in the month of October, which is Bullying Prevention Month. So I hope you'll check that out, that you have the power to prevent bullying and the kids can help be a part of that too. All right, that is what we have for you today. Thanks for hanging in with us. We ran a little over time. I appreciate that very much. Here's our information if you want to email and get in touch. Either of us would be very happy to answer questions or connect you to people and resources. The last thing I want to say is just a big thank you to all of you who are doing this work every day. Our mission and our vision of safe children thriving in a peaceful world could not happen without you. The heavy lifting that you and Rochelle and all of her staff and the partners she works with at Round Rock ISD. So thank you very much. It's a big job and you're really doing wonderful work. And we want to say thank you just from the bottom of our hearts that you're doing this and that you're a partner with us in doing it as well. So please join us again for a webinar in the future. And for now, we're going to say goodbye and take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all. Have a great day.